Halloween, and today we're going to be heading over to Winter Park to Glen Haven Memorial Park Cemetery. I'll see you there. We're here at Yummy House Chinese in Orlando. Gonna grab a bite to eat. We're here at the Glen Haven Cemetery in Winter Park, and this cemetery spans 44 acres of land and has 13,587 burials. We are on the hunt for Dr. Paul Bearer, which it says online that he is buried here. So let's go in and see what we can see. This is a beautiful cemetery, also very large. They're having a veteran service right now as we speak. If you look in the background, I don't know if you can see, he's got the flag over his casket and everything. Oh, it's a sad day for someone. But let me turn the camera around and I'll show you just how vast it is. So this is the Tranquil Oaks Cremation Garden part of the cemetery. Very surreal right now. Just across the way, they're playing taps for the veteran that just passed away, so my heart goes out to them. There's a beautiful memorial part right here, kind of in the back right-hand corner of the cemetery, where there's just a lot of, there's some niches, there are a lot of really neat looking headstones. One a bowling pin and a ball, just different things like that that the departed liked when they were alive. So you can kind of see them walking through it. It's all paved, you know, with pavers, and there are 2 fountains in this little area, but a lot of really neat looking headstones. Very cool, very different. So I'll take a lot of still shots of those. Okay, so this place is just insanely beautiful. There's a koi pond on the property as well, with huge koi fish. And if you look around, there's a whole little pond here with lily pads and lily blossoms coming out of the lily pads, like real lily blossoms. Look at that. Big koi fish. Huge. They're huge. My husband's with me today. He said almost makes him want to die right now and be buried here. So, I mean, it's pretty cool. Like, just when you think you've seen everything here, there's more that just blows you away. So, we're gonna have fun here today for sure. Oh shoot, I thought that was a real alligator. It might be. Oh no, what if it is? You see the gator there? It's a gator head. That looks real too. I don't think my husband saw that. Wow, it's incredible. Very beautiful. There's a waterfall over there. Just cool as anything. cemetery has had a lot of visitors today, which is nice to see. You can tell it's a very well-maintained memorial park, and it really is a park. It's just very pretty. You know, if you live in the area, you want to come around here just to take a walk even, it would be a nice place to take a walk. There's a lot of acreage here, lots and lots of burials if you wanted to check those out, and some really neat looking headstones and statues and things of that nature. So just to give you an idea about how big the cemetery is, it is huge. I've probably combed hundreds of memorials by now, not finding Dr. Paul Bearer. Now, his real name is Ernest Richard Bennick Jr. And I haven't even seen a Bennick, and I've looked at hundreds of memorials. I've seen some Ernests, but no Bennick. So you'll notice that it is a lot of the flat headstone style here, but there are also a lot of the standing headstones as well. they're kind of all pushed off into a certain area of the park here. The cemetery, which is also a memorial park. There's a section up near where the niches are in the back of the cemetery, and I believe this is the Veterans Memorial portion of the cemetery. We saw earlier that they were having a new arrival, and that's right there where he was buried. Go take a look at that real quick. Pay respects. I didn't want to come up here while the family was up here, you know, out of respect for the family. So, yeah, they just had a new burial today. And this is where his family has left him some flowers. Beautiful, beautiful flowers. They smell really good too. They smell so good. Oh, it says beloved husband. Oh, that's terrible. But up here they have just a gorgeous, looks like a niche with really awesome statues depicting Jesus and really when he died on the cross. It's pretty beautiful. You walk down into it. This is awesome. Looks like some folks were here at Christmas time. So it's not a huge niche, but there are several in the cemetery. This is just the veterans one. So it's pretty awesome. Just the way it is, the way they've set it up to where you kind of walk down into it. And the veterans part of the cemetery is raised, so you have to walk upstairs to get to this part of the cemetery. Not like a lot of stairs, but it's just raised up off the ground. You can see there the ground above the niche. So, pretty cool. Very nice. This is the other niche. Very large, but very nice. And this is just across from the Veterans Memorial, just on the other side. In the far right-hand corner of the cemetery. They have a lot of wind chimes around here. Sounds beautiful. This looks fairly new. This whole niche, it looks just very well kept. This episode to the late great Dr. Paul Bearer, aka, and his real name, Ernest Richard Bennick. Now, if you've looked online or ever been interested in finding his final resting place, it does say online that he's buried at Glen Haven Memorial Park in Winter Park. That is not the truth. Me and my husband traveled 2.5 hours twice. Well, actually, the first time it was on the way back from St. Augustine. The second time we went out again just to hopefully talk to somebody in the office and maybe have somebody help us find him. And we learned that nobody at Glen Haven Memorial Park under that name is buried there. So if you are looking for Dr. Paul Bearer, you won't find him at Glen Haven Memorial Park. They did say, however, that his funeral was held at Attribution Funeral Home in Auburndale. So that's about 20 minutes outside of, it's actually traveling back this way as well. So we weren't going out of the way to go there, but we traveled back towards where we were headed anyway and went to Glen Abbey Memorial Park. Now, the Attribution Funeral Home sits on the Glen Abbey Memorial Park property. So that made sense that he would be buried on that property. Now, I went in and I spoke to the lady at the funeral home, and she said, "Oh, we do have somebody by that name buried here." I was excited. She told me to go wait. Somebody would be coming from out of the cemetery to help me find him. And then she comes back and says, "I'm sorry, he's not here. He's not buried here." So I'm a little skeptical as to that response when she had just told me that in fact he was buried there, or at least somebody by that exact name, Ernest Richard Bennick, which is not, I'm sure, a very popular name. So I personally, in my opinion, think that he is buried there. To tell you a little bit about Dr. Paul Bearer, I grew up kind of watching him here and there, but not just that. He lived in the Tri-County area, Tampa or St. Pete, somewhere around there for quite some time, because he would film over on Gandy, where WTOG 44 channel is. And him and his wife would go there once a month, and they would film a month's worth of intros and outros for his program. And basically he would get all of his work done in a single day. So he's my hero. But anyway, he would get all of his work done in a single day, and then he would kind of travel around the area. As a young girl, I used to see his hearse, his 1961 hearse that he always drove. I'd see it at Outback Steakhouse on Henderson quite often. And he would just kind of hang out in the Tampa and St. Pete areas because he worked right around here. His career with WTOG 44 spanned 22 years. And that was the longest running TV horror movie host over at the channel, and I think of all time. And he was something to behold. If you were to see him out in public, he was always in character. And I think one time I saw his hearse and I was like inquiring about it in the car, and I was riding with my dad, and I think my dad said, he actually dresses like that all the time. And I was like, what? That's awesome. I thought it was the coolest thing I've ever heard in my life. So he was a pretty cool guy. Now, Dr. Paul Bearer did not always live here. He actually is a native of Asheville, North Carolina. And there in Asheville, he was a stage magician for a while. And then in 1973, he moved here to Florida. And his character that he portrayed, Dr. Paul Bearer, was the replacement for Count Chocula during that time. But now that you know a little bit about him, everybody didn't agree with his lifestyle. People were offended by it, I guess, back in the day, and a lot of people weren't very nice. Either they were offended by it, or they didn't like that he was parodying, more or less, the dead, driving a hearse around. There was a lot of people that didn't like him, and he was the subject of a lot of ridicule and just mean things. For example, one time, him and his wife were in a parade in St. Pete, and they were driving the hearse, and they were in the parade procession, and so his wife was driving the hearse, and he was sitting up on the hood of the car. Well, there was a bystander that threw a bottle at his wife who was driving the vehicle. At that moment, Dr. Paul Bearer gets in the car, and him and his wife leave the parade, not to return back to that parade. So, in my personal opinion, I do believe that Dr. Paul Bearer is buried at the Glen Haven Memorial Park Cemetery in Auburndale, Florida. He passed away in 1995 from heart surgery complications at the Lakeland Regional Medical Center. And his funeral was there at the Laughlin Funeral Home, which sits on the property of the Glen Haven Cemetery. So it doesn't make sense that he would be, they'd have his funeral there and carry him somewhere else. And that woman even said that they had someone there buried by that name. But I personally think that it's perhaps private to the family, that the family perhaps requested that anybody that came to see him must be family members. And just because of the controversy that Dr. Paul Bearer kind of stirred up when he was here, perhaps the family didn't want people coming and just, vandalizing his resting place or something like that. I personally think that that's what happened. So if you do want to visit his grave, the chances are you may not find him. But I have a sneaky suspicion that that's where he is. If you look online, no matter what you look at, what site you look at, it's always going to say that he's buried at Glen Haven Memorial Park in Winter Park, when in fact, that's not the case. So I just wanted to share that with you. I wanted to dedicate this episode to Dr. Paul Bearer, and I'll see you next time.